It's the Draft Fellows coming at you live. Kyle and Andrew breaking down the drive. Prospects to roster, we got the flow. First round picks to the ones you don't know. Talk about the combine, skills on display. Who's rising up and who's falling away. Roster building like a GM in the zone. Kyle Fellows, Andrew Mertig, they own the phone.
Hey, welcome back to the Draft Fellows podcast. I'm Andrew Mertig. That is Kyle Fellows. Together, we are the Draft Fellows. Make sure you're checking out our channel on YouTube or the audio version on your favorite podcasting platform. Kyle, how are you doing this week?
I'm doing really, really well. I'm excited to get into this conversation. We didn't get to continue through the rest of the NFC on the last show. We decided to break it into two, but we get to do that today. And so I'm excited to have the conversation with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you checked out last week's episode, you heard us breaking down the NFC East and the NFC North draft classes. We're going to continue the process and do the other two divisions in the NFC today. And we are going to start with the NFC South. And first up is the Atlanta Falcons, who had 2 first-round picks after trading back in. So at 15 overall, they get linebacker / edge, Jalen Walker out of Georgia. Then they do trade back up, kind of a rich trade up to get to pick 26 and taking James Pierce Jr., the edge out of Tennessee. And then in the third round, they get safety Xavier Watts out of Notre Dame. Anything that's sticking out here to you?
I mean, it's just like a huge statement to address the defensive side of the ball in such an aggressive way. You mentioned the trade back in, and you kind of wonder if maybe James Pierce Jr. was stacked pretty close to Jalen Walker on their board. And maybe that's why they felt very strongly that, like, hey, what if we could walk away with 2 of these guys? But just a little interesting because they took Penix last year and they have the drama surrounding Kirk Cousins to sort out. And obviously they want Penix to succeed. So there may have been a temptation there to keep giving him more weapons, more protection, but they fully leaned into the defense here and head coach Raheem Morris's strength as a coach. And with Jalen Walker, James Pierce, they certainly got faster on defense. And so that's going to be pretty fun to watch, I think.
Yeah, and it's an interesting calculated risk to trade your first rounder next year in order to move up to acquire a late first rounder this year. So you better have really strong convictions about James Pierce Jr. It sounded like he was somebody they were really interested in at 15. They weren't expecting Jalen Walker to be there, so they grabbed him when they did. And then as Pierce slid a little bit further, they were like, okay, this is our guy. Now, Pierce Jr., interesting. I don't know that he's going to be able to play on rundowns early in his career. So you're hoping that you're going to get the juice on third down. Yeah. And between Walker and Pierce, you're going to get enough pass rush to kind of make up for historically what's been a pretty weak point for the Falcons. And if you get that, nobody cares, right? Because you're going to be a playoff team, you think, based on this offense. And the increase in pass rush is going to allow you to be trading a pick in the 20s or maybe even 30s next year. And no one is going to remember that you had to move up to get James Pierce Jr. But it is calculated risk. And if Falcons have some struggles this year and that pick ends up being kind of high, then this is a very rich price to pay for what is seen as a pretty specialized edge rusher at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. The rest of this class is interesting. They continue to kind of go defense with Xavier Watts, Billy Bowman, there from Oklahoma. I'm curious if you liked any part of this day 3, anything jump out to you as they continue to kind of fill out the defense?
Billy Bowman's very interesting as like a really athletic, good ball skills kind of safety. I just don't know what he provides in the run game at all. Like I'm scared of this guy tackling in space. I believe his tackle rate is like alarmingly bad. And so, you know, that's a player that you are hoping Raheem Morris can really develop on the back end of that secondary. The ball skills are super intriguing. And, you know, maybe this is the guy who's just going to specialize as like a nickel safety. And that could be really fun. So I think, like, I always say with prospects, tell me what you can do. Don't tell me what they can't do. And so he has some really high level skills that you're probably not going to typically get in a 4th round safety. If he can overcome some of those weaknesses, or if you can find a specialty role, which I think is fine out of a 4th round player, You're maybe cooking with grease. Now, I am, of course, a Wisconsin homer, so love Jack Nelson. I understand why he slid to the 7th round. He's kind of like a big, stiff guy. But what he reminds me of a little bit is another Wisconsin player who slid to the 7th round, and that is Rob Havenstein, who has carved out this really long pro career. And if I'm going to take a gamble on somebody to develop as like a really quality, maybe not spectacular, but an adequate level starter in the NFL, Nelson is the kind of player you can sign me up for, because I know he's going to be a mover in the run game. And he's got enough strength and enough length to survive at a right tackle-like position where he maybe doesn't have to deal with the super quick bendy guys.
Absolutely. And I know like there are a lot of Xavier Watts truthers out there. The safety class didn't get a lot of love, but there are a lot of people who liked him. And I think getting him in the 3rd round is probably a pretty sweet spot to get him and see what he can bring. But all around, this was certainly a draft class that was intent on improving that defense. So we'll kind of see what the Falcons become this year as they kind of lean into the future on offense, but now on defense as well. But what about if we flip over to the Carolina Panthers here?
Yeah, for sure. So the Panthers at pick 8 take wide receiver Tetairoa McMillan out of Arizona. In the 2nd round, they come back and get edge Nick Scorton out of Texas A&M. And then the 3rd round, they're going to take Princely Umanmielen, the edge out of Ole Miss. I think I got that right. I had it down around draft season, and now we are so far removed that I haven't talked about him since. Princely U.
Yeah, I like it. Princely U. That works for me. I will go with that.
So I think getting started, of course, Tetairoa McMillan is going to be the highlight here. I think when you're looking at what Bryce Young did really, really well down the stretch that gets your optimism going in Carolina was he threw an incredible percentage on the deep ball. His underneath stuff was actually pretty wildly inaccurate. So if you want some cause for concern, that's where it is. But McMillan is a contested catch guy. He's going to be able to get vertical and I think make some plays down the field, even though he doesn't necessarily have like elite speed or quickness. I think he is the kind of player who can really make the most of those contested catch situations, which you're going to have to do as a pro. I think he's a good enough route runner. And I think, when you look at what the Carolina Panthers have at the wide receiver position, it's like Adam Thielen, how long can he keep doing it?
Yeah.
We didn't really see much out of Xavier Legette last year. So, getting him somebody who can be a true difference maker at the position is going to be really, really important in what is going to be a crucial year in the Bryce Young era.
Yeah, I like T-Mac plenty, but he was my wide receiver 3. So taking him this early, it's a leap into what he can become, right? Like if he hits his ceiling, absolutely is an impact player that gets that offense and Bryce Young quite a bit further into their development, I think. But the Nick Scorton pick is really interesting where they got him in the 2nd round. He's a player who's a little hard to figure out because his playing weight was all over the place. But I think he's a good player, and it's possible that Carolina got a real value there. Just depending on where they end up having him play, what weight they have him play at. So a fascinating first couple of picks here for the Panthers.
Yeah, Scorton was awesome at Purdue, and then he transfers to Texas A&M. They asked him to put on all sorts of weight. At least that's what him and Shamar Stewart indicated, was they want really heavy edges. And neither one of them had much of a pass rush profile. So we'll see if they get that playing weight down a little bit. Carolina certainly needed help at edge, and so you see them double dip in the 2nd and 3rd rounds. And for day 3 picks, the one that really sticks out to me is their 2nd, 4th round pick. They get safety Lathan Ransom out of Ohio State, who is an absolute hitter. And he is going to make life miserable for players coming over the middle. I think Ransom could be a potential starter for this Carolina team as early as maybe the 2nd half of this season. And I think this is a long-term cog in that secondary. And so I really like what he provides. Maybe a little bit more of a throwback safety, but he does have the requisite skills athletically to be, a sufficient player in the pass game. But I really like what he can do in sticking his nose into the run fits, and then also, making life miserable for a Chris Godwin or a Chris Olave trying to cross over the middle of the field. You always got to keep your head up with a player like Ransom.
Yeah, and so to start this draft, T-Mac, Scorton, like those were not like my favorite guys in the draft. Good players, not my favorites. So I was kind of like, meh about the start to the Carolina draft. But where they hit, I feel like this day 3 is really nice. You mentioned Ransom already, but Trevor Etienne, really interesting prospect because obviously the Jonathan Brooks injury there last year was a huge bummer for the Panthers and his, the organization there, and his career just didn't start out the way that they wanted to. They have Chuba Hubbard and other guys there, but Etienne could certainly carve out a role there, and maybe a significant one as a receiving back pretty early in his time there in Carolina. Mitchell Evans, the other player, they took him in the 5th round, the tight end from Notre Dame. This is a player that like you can't kind of really go off of his most recent tape because of some of the factors. But if you reach back to 2023, 2022, you see some things that get you pretty excited. He had a broken foot actually in 22 and an ACL in 23. So you get glimpses throughout that tape of what he can become. He's a good hands catcher, contested catcher. He's a plus contributor as a blocker, probably like a tight end 2 type in the NFL who's going to do that dirty work. Maybe never going to be that dynamic receiving threat for you, but really good interview, selfless player. And when he comes back from those injuries, I think he's a player that you might get a really nice surprise, and more than they had to take him in the 5th round. So definitely a player that I was pretty excited to take a roll of the dice on day 3, and Mitchell Evans.
Yeah, and with Tommy Tremble, Jatavian Sanders, Mitchell Evans, that's a pretty stacked tight end room.
Yeah.
Could potentially be really fun going forward, and some other assistance for Bryce Young. So now we're going to flip over to the New Orleans Saints. And so in the 1st round, they take Kelvin Banks, the offensive lineman out of Texas, at 9 overall. And then in the 2nd round, they come back and they take the quarterback, Tyler Shuck. Well, I still don't know why it's pronounced Shuck. No one can answer this question, out at Louisville. And then they have 2 third-round picks. At 71, they get Vernon Broughton, the defensive lineman out of Texas. And then at 93, Jonas Sanker, the defensive back out of Virginia. So what are we thinking here, Kyle?
Man, Kellen Moore has kind of got himself quite a situation here in New Orleans. It's really fascinating. I don't know what they're going to do. I don't know about you, Andrew, but growing up, I love to take Madden franchises that were really bad and try to make them good. And I just kind of feel like that's the situation in New Orleans, right? Like they had Derek Carr, he's gone, he's got the injury. That's a total mess. But now like Tyler Shuck, like however you want to say his last name, he might be a starter in the NFL and like really, really fast. And so like I don't know how that's going to go, but he's going to get that opportunity. And then Kelvin Banks is going to come in and provide some stability for that offensive line, much needed stability. So they did some things early here to like, mix things up. I don't know if anybody thought that Tyler Shuck was going to like walk in and potentially be the starter for the New Orleans Saints. And so it's kind of this organization that's crumbling in some ways, but also they're trying to put all the pieces together so that Kellen Moore can run this offense. It's just going to be interesting to see like, how does it work? And like, what do they do? Because I really do think Kellen Moore is going to come in with some really creative offensive ideas. How are they going to make it all come together?
Yeah, and this is the organization that, in my opinion, really needed a very hard reset this offseason, and they continue to refuse to do it. So if you're going to go forward with this win now mentality and just keep pushing money in the future, keep mortgaging everything forward, you have to hit on your draft class.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the thing. I don't think we have a lot of Saints listeners. I always get like a lot of nasty feedback when I talk about the Saints cap situation. So sorry about that. This is probably my least favorite draft class in the NFL this year. I did not think Kelvin Banks was a top 10 player. I'm not even sure I really thought of it. Like I thought he was maybe a late 1st rounder at best. I didn't like Tyler Shuck, and their 3rd rounders are not players that I thought belonged in the top 100. So this is a rough one for me. Now, I've been wrong enough that it's fine, right? Like every single one of those players could hit and people would not be surprised. But I mean, for Tyler Shuck, who is very experienced. It's going to be a pretty old rookie. But for him to have to step in and be the starter on a team that has a lot of question marks, and granted, one of them is offensive line, and maybe Kelvin Banks steps in and is a really good starter from day one. But still, you're facing that. You're facing an aging roster. I think they are going to be reliant on hitting on most of their picks this year, and I just don't see it.
Yeah, I'm with you. Kelvin Banks is fine. Like, it's fine. I would not have taken him at 9. Like, I'm with you. But Tyler Shuck, there are some intangible things that's a reason that a team fell in love with him. And I think that he's going to have to come in and lead that team in ways that I don't think anybody anticipated. So good on him for having that character, because he's probably going to need it to step in and be that guy. But like you said it, like a team in that situation, I think a lot of people thought like there's no way that they can get out from under Derek Carr. Like, how are they going to get out from under Derek Carr? Well, that kind of solved itself. but now we got to figure out, now what are we going to do? And like they needed to hit these picks. And Banks, all right, we'll wait and see. But like, I don't know, these second and third round picks, like I just don't know that I project that they're going to be highly impactful early. If we're looking for a silver lining, because maybe we have some Saints fans out there, forgive us. I like Quincy Riley. I think he's a good corner, like 4th round, probably an appropriate spot to take him. That's probably a good pick. And then Devin Neal. I love Devin Neal. So that's like the one diamond in the rough in this class. And I know what's weird about Devin Neal is like I've been pounding the table for Kendre Miller for like years. And guys, I just don't think it's going to happen. Like I want it to happen so bad, but it might be time to move on. And of course, like Alvin Kamara is still there, but it would not shock me to see Devin Neal pass up Kendre Miller pretty quickly. He's a player that kind of reminded me of Kareem Hunt. He's good at everything, not great at any one thing, but he was also a team leader, team captain in college. The coaches are going to trust him, which seems to have been kind of like an issue with Kendre Miller, like regardless of what you think of like the former coaching staff and those kinds of things. So Devin Neal might be the star to come out of this draft class if you're looking for a diamond in the rough.
I do really like Devin Neal as well, and I was going to mention him, so good call out there. I also like their 4th round pick, Danny Stutzman, the linebacker out of Oklahoma. I think he's a really good player, and I think that's a very safe floor with the opportunity to be a really good starter if everything hits really well. And with an aging linebacker core, I think he fits right in there, and could potentially learn from Demario Davis and become a really good pro. I'm not going to derail us with a 10-minute conversation on roster building and but this is just my opinion. Instead of spending a 2nd round pick on Tyler Shuck, right? Do a hard reset this year. Say we're not going to be any good anyways, and then trade a day 3 pick for a Jake Browning or a Tyson Bagent, or sign Mac Jones. Like,
there you go.
You don't need to draft Tyler Shuck in the 2nd round. I don't get it. I don't get much of what the Saints do, but they don't care what I think. So,
it was not, the reality is it was not that good of a quarterback class to start with.
Right.
And so if you didn't get one at the top, the odds of the ones being good at the back end of that process, probably those odds are not in your favor. But like, I hope Shuck has a great career. Just the odds are very stacked against them. And so like, I think it's fair to question that process. Like you said, like bring in somebody who is just going to be a bridge quarterback instead of spending premium draft capital on who's going to be a bridge quarterback. And then you're going to be doing this again next year.
Absolutely. And so we'll move over to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers before I get myself in even more trouble. In the 1st round, at pick 19, they take Emeka Egbuka, the wide receiver out of Ohio State. In the 2nd round, they get Benjamin Morrison, the corner out of Notre Dame. And they take another corner in the 3rd round, Jacob Parrish out of Kansas State.
I love Emeka Egbuka, man. And I thought he was coming out last year. And so I've been watching him for a while, excited to see him get into the league. But I did not think that the Bucs were going to do this. Like the Bucs were really they were quiet about this, and they're a really good organization right now. I think they're really well run, and I think that they see the sunset on Mike Evans and potentially even Chris Godwin as we get down, the next couple of years. And so they wanted to reinvest in that position so that Baker Mayfield can keep slinging it. So I think it might take a minute, but I think Egbuka will thrive in Tampa Bay. It just was not a pick that I saw coming at all. Benjamin Morrison, kind of stands to be the steal of the draft, but it's just up to his hips, right? Like, he is the Labrador retriever of NFL corners now. Like, he's had 2 hip surgeries since high school. So if he can stay healthy, Tampa got a huge steal at where they took him in this draft. And then, of course, Jacob Parrish, really good player, just undersized, right? But super physical. So where they play him, how they get the most out of him is going to be interesting. But I think the Bucks, a couple of years from now, like, we could look back and think that this is a really good draft class for them.
Absolutely. Ibuka was my wide receiver 1. Really love what he can do. I'm bummed for like dynasty fantasy football that he's not going to be much of a contributor in year 1, but
Yeah.
obviously the path is there, and we don't know how Chris Godwin's going to return from injury. Mike Evans, I don't know. They keep telling me Father Time is undefeated, but Mike Evans is trying to prove that wrong. Just continues to be great. But yeah, for Baker Mayfield, just an embarrassment of riches. And, I love Jalen McMillan last year. And so I don't know what his path forward is now. Maybe both of them are going to be the starters in the near future. But Benjamin Morrison, one of my favorite players in this class, just a pure technician. And I just hope he's healthy because he's going to be so darn good. And Jacob Parrish was another one of my favorite players. I love him. Like, yes, he's small, but he's so feisty. I think he's got really phenomenal ball skills. Reminded me a little bit of Jair Alexander, like in his ability to stick his nose in where it probably shouldn't be. And, I like those players that maybe are a little undersized, but make up for it with their play. And so he's a really fun one. If I'm going to look day 3, like, getting Tez Johnson with a 7th round pick. I know we just talked about like there's no room in this wide receiver core. But if he's going to be wide receiver 5 or 6, whatever, like, I know he tested awful, but before the testing, I thought he was like a 2nd or 3rd round pick. So, to get him in the 7th and be able to take that risk, it didn't look like he was slow on tape against Ohio State. I'll just say that. So, I mean, maybe this is us just way overreacting to testing times, and the Buccaneers get a ridiculous deep threat that nobody saw coming.
Yeah, Tez Johnson, 7th round, easy pick. Like, that's fine. Take that risk, and like you said, like, that's worth chasing to see if you catch lightning in a bottle there with him. David Walker, fine, defensive tackle from Central Arkansas. Elijah Roberts, another fine defensive lineman from SMU. So nothing to write home here about. I think Tez Johnson is the one that makes you kind of perk your ears up and be like, okay, like, if it hits, maybe you get something special there from him.
All right, so we're transitioning over to the NFC West now, and we'll kick things off with the Arizona Cardinals. At pick 16, they take defensive lineman Walter Nolan out of Ole Miss. In the 2nd round, they get corner Will Johnson out of Michigan. And then in the 3rd, they're going to get edge Jordan Birch out of Oregon.
This draft is maybe the highest risk, highest reward draft of all time. Like, Walter Nolan, one of the highest ceiling players in the entire draft class. Some notable personality things with him, not necessarily character things, but just like fit and drive, and like, how is he going to vibe in an NFL locker room and with coaching staffs and those kinds of things. So fascinating, but like super high ceiling, incredibly talented. Will Johnson at 47 is totally insane. Like, this is not a player that ever should have dropped to 47. Obviously, the medical concerns there must have been very real for that to happen. Again, high risk, high reward. If he can play, if he can stay on the field, no way he doesn't outplay that draft position. And then I love Jordan Birch, right? Like, moves really well for a big guy, kind of is a weird tweener player. He played between 290, 295, but he weighed in at 279 at the combine. And I think if he stays at that higher weight, he's probably going to get stuck as a tweener. But if he could play at that combine weight at like 279 and just kind of embrace his athleticism, I would love to see him play as a true edge player in that role. So we'll see what he ends up being for the Cardinals. But I really did like Jordan Birch as well. So at the top of this draft, like, I'm terrified. Like, if I'm a Cardinal fan, I'm like, this could go sideways really fast, but also like, this could be a franchise altering draft class for them for sure.
Yeah, and the Cardinals had one of the worst defensive lines in all of football last year and completely remade that room. I think it's going to be a major strength of this team this year,
Okay.
and Walter Nolan just gets to be a part of that. So you're not drafting him and saying, okay, well, you're our go-to. You're going to be a 3-down defensive tackle and, figure it out on the fly. No, I think they're going to be able to put him in position to succeed. And knowing that your head coach has a background being the defensive coordinator for the Eagles, you're going to see how they're trying to implement just that going forward. And I think Walter Nolan, while it is a risky pick, I think, they're going to put him in really good position to succeed. Will Johnson was my second overall player in the entire draft class. So to get him at 47 is crazy.
It's insane.
I don't care if he doesn't make it to, I care. I hope he makes it to his second contract. But if he doesn't, still wonderful value at pick 47. If he can get on the field, he is going to be a difference maker at corner. I made some crazy comparisons to Patrick Peterson pre-draft.
Okay.
And now we're seeing Cardinals, maybe some planets have aligned there, but I love that pick. I know who you're going to pick for day 3, and it's my pick, so I'm going to let you go first.
That's so kind of you. I figured we're probably going to talk about the same guy, so I'll leave some meat on the bone here for you. But Denzel Burke, probably set to be a second-round pick until he got cooked by Tez Johnson, who we just talked about with the Bucs, right? But a 7th-round pick, cooking a guy who was, talked first round at one point. It just didn't work out for him at the end of the process, but I still think he's a really good football player with some athletic limitations that you have to account for. I'm just so curious to see how his career develops, because I don't think that he probably deserved the absolute just tanking of draft stock that we saw throughout the spring when the end of the season did not go well for him.
Yeah, I'd love to hear what he had to say about that game specifically in the interviews with teams, because I thought the rest of his tape was all right this year. And his tape, if you go back 1 year, was awesome. So I think maybe there was something going on. Maybe he was nicked up a little bit. Maybe he just had an off game. That happens sometimes. But I think that risk in the 5th round is wonderful. And I think that is a potential player that, if Will Johnson can stay healthy and you get the better version of Denzel Burke, suddenly you have a phenomenal class just with those two. And I think there's some other, building blocks that you talked about with Walter Nolan, Jordan Birch too. So that's a fun one. Now we switch over to the Los Angeles Rams, and they traded out of the 1st round. We mentioned the Falcons earlier, so they're going to acquire a future pick. But in the 2nd round, they are going to take tight end Terrence Ferguson out of Oregon. And then the 3rd round, they get Josiah Stewart, the defensive lineman out of Michigan.
Yeah, so it's pretty clear that the Rams don't care about your consensus boards at all. I think that they did, getting that trade done, I think was incredibly wise. And sometimes you have to just kind of eat your vegetables, and it's not super fun in the present, but knowing that you set yourself up well for the future. So that makes a ton of sense. Terrence Ferguson was actually one of my guys. Actually, I liked him a lot more than most people, but I did not think he was going to go in the 40s in the 2nd round. I thought late 2, probably early 3 was probably the kind of the earliest he would go. But I think he could have an absolutely huge role for LA and pretty quickly in that offense. So that's kind of exciting when you think about what he steps into there. Josiah Stewart in this class, are we there yet? I don't know if we're all the way into the depths of this. He's the 3rd round pick. He tested horribly, ran terribly, but a good football player, ultra productive, 30 sacks over the course of his career at Michigan, team captain. So he's a player that I didn't know if he was going to go in the 3rd round, because I kind of thought maybe he killed his stock a little bit more than that, but I think he deserves it. So this is a player I hope he can get on the field and is a good football player, even with the testing just being kind of absolutely atrocious.
Yeah, the Rams clearly do not care about your RAS score. And they're obviously there's some exceptions, right? Like Braden Fisk was an RAS superstar, but I think they're just looking at football players and they don't care about athletic testing at all. And we've seen that pay off big time for them from players like Puka Nacua, Cameron Kitchens. They're willing to go outside of that testing realm and say, okay, well, you're a good football player on tape. We don't need to know what you run in your underwear. So I think what I like about what the Rams did is this is already a very young roster and a very talented roster, but instead of getting your first round pick, which is great, and I'm sure they would have done something really good with it. You're like pushing that resource into next year, and what you're going to be able to do with that is, okay, well, we'll have a little bit more clarity on the Matthew Stafford situation. Next year is supposed to be a really fantastic quarterback class. We'll see if that holds up. But now the Rams have 2 picks in order to do something with it. And in addition, this is a team that's willing to sell picks if they feel the need. So if they're really in a competitive window and they have a big need and there's a player available, they could also part with one of those first round picks and make a splash in season. So like what they did there, Terrence Ferguson has an opportunity to be a really impactful player year one. They were, of course, very eager to get in on the Brock Bowers sweepstakes last year. There were some rumors connecting them with some different tight ends this year, including Colson Loveland. So, Ferguson gives you maybe a little bit of that in an athletic perspective. And so we'll see how he fits in with Tyler Higbee looking to recover this year. And then day 3, one of the players that really sticks out to me is their second, 5th rounder, Chris Paul Jr., the linebacker out of Ole Miss. I think he's a really talented player, and the Rams tend to get the most out of their linebackers, even when they're day 3 picks or UDFAs. And so I think Chris Paul Jr. could be in line to have a really good rookie year.
Yeah, Jarquez Hunter, their 4th round pick, the running back out of Auburn, is interesting. Not so much because I loved him as a prospect. I thought he was okay, but they loved him. And they do the shows like where you get like the peer into the draft room, and they prioritized him early on day 3. And so fascinating, even more than Hunter the player, is his piece in this offense, because they keep taking small running backs. And I guess Jarquez is like, he pushes 210, but like they have Kyron Williams, who is small, great player, but he's small. And then Blake Corum is listed at like 210, but like Blake Corum's not 210 pounds. So like they have 3 running backs who are 210 or under, and probably all play a little bit closer to like 205. So that is a fascinating, they are not playing, they're not assembling a basketball team here in the running back room with like various skill sets. Like it's they seem to like, not saying they're all the same, but it's interesting that they were like, we need another guy who is not incredibly different than what we have. So fascinating to see how quickly Jarquez can get on the field, because they made such an effort to get him, even though they really didn't need him especially that much. So I don't know. It's very interesting to me.
Yeah, that's for an RB3 to invest your 3rd pick in the draft, whether it's a 4th round or not, it's still your 3rd pick in the draft. That is an interesting one. So we'll see if they can find a role for him. And now we have 2 massive draft classes to end the show. San Francisco 49ers, which is 11 picks. But they start off at pick 11 with edge Michael Williams out of Georgia. In the 2nd round, they get defensive lineman Alfred Collins out of Texas, and then 2 3rd-round picks, linebacker Nick Martin from Oklahoma State and cornerback Upton Stout out of Western Kentucky.
So San Francisco needed to address their defense, and they needed to do it in a big way, and they did it in this draft, right? 6 of their first 7 picks went to the defensive side of the ball. And so early on, Michael Williams, super young player who's going to be a great run defender. The pass rush ceiling is certainly there, very intriguing, and he has that ability to develop there. Lance Zierlein pointed out that 30% of Williams' tackles came behind the line of scrimmage, which is really, really impressive. So he is going to be an impactful player who makes those plays in the backfield. I loved both of the defensive tackles that the San Francisco 49ers took. They took Alfred Collins, Indiana's CJ West as well. I'll talk about both of those guys here, but Collins, big and long. West is a little bit more short and stout, but it's interesting with Collins, West, and Michael Williams. I had in my notes for all of these guys separately that all these guys were better run defenders than they were pass rushers at this point in their career. So it seems that the 49ers were pretty intent on making a considerable jump at getting better and defending the run. So just an interesting emphasis that we see very early on in this draft and then throughout the class of the guys that they brought in.
Yeah, this is the 49ers defense that was already kind of rough last year. Like I think they were living on the reputation. Their defensive line was terrible all of last year. And they had some major losses in free agency and some players that they were forced to cut. So really, obviously, an emphasis there to rebuild. And so you have Brock Purdy locked up, but that takes a lot of the resources that you were spending on your defense and pushes them to the offensive side of the ball. And so you're going to need to hit on some of these picks. And Michael Williams is like a edge rusher built in a lab. And I think the 49ers are confident enough in their coaching staff to get the most out of him. Robert Saleh is returning as defensive coordinator, correct?
I believe so.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think his player development, especially at the edge position, like you believe in that. You believe in your positional coaches if you're San Francisco, because Kyle Shanahan always hires really, really well. So a lot of really good player development. I like what they're doing there. And then, like you mentioned, I mean, we need everything on defense. So we're just going to take the best defensive player that we think is available at each one of our picks. And so, reading down, edge, defensive line, linebacker, corner, defensive line, what they needed. And so I think they did a really good job there. You already mentioned CJ West in the 4th round, but any other day 3 picks of theirs that you liked?
So I love Jordan James, and he was actually, full transparency, my running back 7, which was probably like, he was one of those guys I was like, I don't know, like maybe I should pull him down because like I like him more than others. I just left him there, but he's feet, patience, agility are the things that you notice with him. A decent contact balance for a guy who's not very big. He's, again, we talked about Devin Neal earlier, but this is another guy who's not elite in any one category, but just really good all around. And I kind of saw him as a little bit of a less explosive Aaron Jones type. And maybe that's kind of hard because so much of what Aaron Jones does is explosive. But at the same time, Aaron Jones has incredible contact balance for a guy who is pretty undersized. So I saw a lot of that in Jordan James. So obviously Christian McCaffrey is there. Obviously, Christian McCaffrey has some durability concerns, and there are a lot of people who really like Garendo there in that backup role. But it would not shock me if Jordan James was a guy who kind of may surpass Garendo pretty quickly, and just being someone that they can trust to just be an all-around good running back for them.
Yeah, somebody needs to teach Oregon players how to run these drills at the combine, because I don't know why all the Oregon players are super fast on the like college football field and then really bad in these drills. You and I were so high on Bucky Irving, and then he didn't run well. He slid. Same thing with Jordan James. They're not the same player by any means, but I would say, like, look at what he is on film, and you'll see a better player than a 5th round pick. And so I like what they're doing there. A couple other players that I'll mention: Curtis Rourke, the quarterback out of Indiana. I mean, he played through a torn ACL this year and like really did a lot of cool things with Indiana. Nobody should ever expect a 7th round quarterback to succeed, Kyle.
Never. That's never happened.
Like, if you want like the Brock Purdy path, Rourke is a really experienced college quarterback. He's got really good timing and accuracy. Physical tools aren't all there. So, I think what you're looking for there is to get a really quality backup. And I think Rourke has the opportunity to do that once the knee is rehabbed. So, like, taking that risk in the 7th round. Connor Colby, guard out of Iowa, like, not splashy at all, but you and I are really careful about not jersey scouting. And this is the 3rd time in this show I've mentioned this because I talked about a Wisconsin tackle, and then I talked about, I forget what the other player was. But like an Iowa offensive lineman, it just seems like there's this baseline of fundamental skills that you learn as a long-standing starter at Iowa that is going to help you transition to the NFL and at least be a quality backup player. And so I like that. I think it would have been a better pick in Green Bay because you want a Packer whose last name is Colby, but I digress. So we move on to the Seattle Seahawks. And in the 1st round at pick 18, they take Gray Zabel, the offensive lineman out of North Dakota State. In the 2nd round, they have 2 picks, and they're going to get safety Nick Emanwari out of South Carolina and the tight end Elijah Arroyo out of Miami. And then the 3rd round, they take quarterback Jalen Milroe out of Alabama.
So I kind of think a lot of people saw the Gray Zabel pick coming. There was like not a lot that was chalk in this draft when we got around to actually making the picks, but it was just kind of the perfect blend of need and talent there for Seattle. Zabel's a guy who had a fantastic interview. super focused. Attention to detail is, through the roof. He has a baseball background, played quarterback until he got too big. So just a guy that you want to bring into your building and improved every year of his collegiate career. So the fascinating thing about Zabel is the best year of his tape was 2024, and he was basically exclusively a left tackle. So that's interesting because he does project best inside because of his lack of length. So this feels like a slam dunk safe pick, but there is a little bit of projection involved here when you move him to the inside and like how that's going to work for him. But I think we all saw that coming. Jalen Milroe, makes so much sense. Another guy, just Mike McDonald saw Lamar Jackson in practice every day for a few years in Baltimore. The opportunity to take a shot on an athlete, not the same guy, but similar mold in the third round was just too much for him to pass up. So, and then Nicky Manwari, again, back to Baltimore. Kyle Hamilton was drafted by the Ravens in 2002. And you see another big safety like Nicky Manwari could be that appealing presence for them in the back end of that defense. So a guy who's huge, but also I think the unique thing about Manwari is that his movement skills are not compromised at his size. He's still a really smooth mover, and that's something that they saw in Kyle Hamilton as well. So a lot of picks here for the Seattle Seahawks that I think makes sense when you look at them through the lens of the coaching staff that they have.
Yeah, Imanwari to Baltimore actually kind of became my fun side quest in the pre-draft process. Can we get these two freaks together? And so him landing in Seattle is such a good fit with Mike McDonald. Elijah Arroyo, a fun move tight end. I think he's got a lot of upside. And so we'll see if maybe he could be that sort of what Noah Fant was supposed to be when he was drafted by Denver. I think he has that kind of skill set, but those kind of tight ends typically take a little bit of time to develop. So we'll see what they can do there. And then, you already talked about Jalen Milroe. He was one of my favorite players in this class. And I just think nobody has that kind of athleticism. Can he fix the throwing mechanics? This is something Lamar Jackson did an outstanding job of. Now, Lamar Jackson was already way ahead of where Jalen Milroe is now, and Lamar still sat for a year, right? The Ravens were just using some specialized packages. I think Milroe probably needs at least that full year, maybe even 2. And I know that gets risky because you get forgotten about when you're that player. And sometimes teams move on and they're going to draft somebody. But with Sam Darnold, you have your starter in place. Probably Milroe doesn't even have to be the backup, but if they want to throw in some special packages for him, they can use them that way right away. But I think, the raw talent here of being a difference maker to the level of Lamar and Jaden Daniels, if he figures out the throwing mechanics, is worth taking a player at pick 92, even if that is a massive uphill climb to get him to the point where he can play quarterback in the NFL.
So on day 3 here, there are 2 players that I would like to highlight, and one of them I know that I like, but you love. So I'm going to leave that one alone. I'm going to let you do that in just a second here. Maybe you like this other player too, but Torrey Horton is kind of one of my favorite sleepers in this class. He's a great vertical player who has the skill set, I think, to keep expanding his role and really be an all-around receiver. I love the fit in Seattle because with JSN and Kupp in the fold there, he really just needs to beat out MVS, and he immediately has a pretty significant share of this offense as a perimeter wide receiver. So he's the guy that if you play fantasy football, I'm grabbing everywhere just because I feel like the path for him to get on the field is pretty linear. So love Torrey Horton. 2024 was not his best year, but if you look back to 23, you get pretty excited about the player that he could become in the NFL. But I'm going to guess you may want to talk about a player here that might be a running back, if I'm not wrong.
And so I thought Horton was the one you were going to give me because I had him really high as well. So love that you pointed him out. But I was also looking at running back Damian Martinez out of Miami. Really surprised he fell to the 7th round. I know this is a deep draft class. I know he was an underclassman, but I just love his ability and his versatility. I think he was one of the better pass catching backs in this class. And so this is another weird situation. We talked about Devin Neal. We talked about Jordan James. This is a guy who's pretty clearly the 3rd running back on the depth chart. And there's nowhere to go if Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet are healthy. But I think this is a guy who, if you need him to step up, if one of those players misses some time, can give you some really good contributions. And maybe in a year or two, if Kenneth Walker leaves, for instance, I think this could be a really impact player, and you're getting him in the 7th round. So love that value.
Yeah, absolutely. I do hate that he's buried there, and I hate that Seattle keeps drafting really good running backs that just get buried on depth charts. But Martinez is 225 at his pro day. He probably played pretty close to that weight. I think he was lighter at the combine, but when you go up in weight again like that quickly, I feel like this is a guy who played big. Maybe he finds a role there and helps them, get in the end zone and those kinds of things. But loved what they did here on day 3 with especially the Martinez and the Torrey Horton picks. But this has been a really fun conversation. We've made it all the way through the rest of the NFC. So thanks for joining us for this conversation. Make sure you like and subscribe to the show and watch for our next episode to drop in the days ahead. We'll continue to drop our thoughts on all 32 draft classes as we work all the way through all the divisions. We're going to flip over to the AFC with the next show, so keep an eye out for that. But from the draft room to the gridiron, the Draft Fellas have got you covered. Until next time, stay tuned and stay in the game.
Kyle got the insight, Andrew brings the heat. Breaking down the roster every single week. Catch us on the podcast, we coming through your speakers. Top picks for practice squad, we got the seekers. Team dynamics, contracts, and the trades. From the draft day excitement to the accolades. Draft fellows on the track, we gone strong. Analyze the plays, we can't be wrong. From the 40-yard dash to the longest throw.